Guess who's back? Back again. Tell a friend. Guess who's back? 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 Guess who's back?
Welcome back, everybody. After about an 8-month hiatus, Bart and Wang are back. The fat guys are back, Wang.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Yeah, be ready, all right? We're coming at you for a podcast today. We're going to get back into it. Our schedule's a little more normalized. Wang's moving soon, but we'll adjust to that. Today we're going to talk about some sports. We're going to break up the podcast just to give our 15 listeners some update here. We're going to break it up into one sports, one wrestling, one a week, not combine them so much. So today we're going to do some sports. We're going to talk about NFL tanking and what that can look like and if it's here. Both of us think that there are going to be some teams this year that intentionally lose some games, try to get in that first 2 or 3 draft positions. We're going to talk about some NBA drama, a little bit of baseball at the end. But, so like I said, we're going to do all sports today. And, Wang, it feels good to be back on the phone with you, my friend.
I want to come out with a blazing hot take.
Ooh, here we go.
Yeah. Everybody says that NFL training camp and preseason time is the best time of the year because football's back. Yes. I highly disagree because it's the biggest cock tease of the year.
You're not wrong in that sense, but I think it's just people say that because there have been 2 months where it's just been baseball and NBA drama, and it's like, hey, you know what? At a certain point, listening to 30-year-old grown men that are professional basketball players and rich complain like junior high school girls gets a little old, and now we get to do it about football, which is just all around better.
How fun is it to watch Blaine Gabbert throw a football for 2 hours? That's not fun to me.
You don't speak ill of Blaine Gabbert. He is trying very hard out there.
He's going to make a roster, but when you're a Steelers fan like me, all this time is just for people to get injured or people to get busted for smoking pot or for your quarterback to potentially rape a girl.
See, you're not wrong, but that's fun for everybody else that doesn't like the Steelers. They're waiting for Le'Veon Bell to get pulled over with weed in the car.
Or not knowing that he can get a DUI for being high.
Yeah, see? He learned. He hasn't done it yet, which is actually kind of surprising.
That's because he's trying to get paid. He wants to get paid like a number 1 running back and a number 2 wide receiver all in the same contract, which is just asinine.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But
all right.
I said, we're going to get into some NFL tanking. So we've obviously seen in the NBA, tanking kind of works. The Philadelphia 76ers kind of took it to a whole new level by not trying for the better part of a decade. And now they're going to come out with a roster full of really good young talent that potentially can become one of the best rosters in the league on a really controllable salary scale. And ideally, that's what you're kind of looking for when you tank. You're looking for young talent, and then you can control their contracts for 4 years and maybe throw in another piece if that talent does kind of pan out in their rookie contracts. But we haven't seen that in the NFL. Before we get into who we think could do it this year or why we think it can happen, why do you think it hasn't happened yet in the NFL? I mean, the NFL doesn't have a draft lottery. It has if you're the worst team, you get the number 1 pick system. So why aren't teams that need the number 1 pick already just saying, screw it, we're losing all these games?
It's such a good question, but I don't know if there's a for sure answer. But the thing that pops out to me is just, it's so quarterback driven that there's not always the consensus best quarterback that you can tank and try to get. So depending on the draft class, you might not want to tank because there might not be the quarterback you want, unlike this year where there looks to be like 3, maybe even 4 can't miss guys.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. And the most recent example of a team that was supposed to be good that ended up being terrible and got the next quarterback was the Colts back when Peyton Manning got his neck injury. And they kind of lucked into that where Peyton Manning got hurt.
Pun.
So
nice
then they
pun.
were, oh, well, fuck you. They kind of lucked into it where Peyton Manning gets hurt, so then it's like, oh, shoot, we're going to be 2-14. We can get the best guy anyway, and then figure out what we're going to do with Manning later. But yeah, like you said, we haven't seen teams just straight up say, hey, that's the guy we want, we're going to lose games. And I think the biggest issue is because there are only 16 games in the NFL season, and you only get 8 at home. So you only have 8 chances to make your big revenue of bringing people into the stadium and making the concessions, making the tickets, making the money off the parking, everything like that. Obviously in the NFL, all the owners' money basically comes from the TV deals, which are just massive. But that operations money where you're bringing people into the stadium and having them buy beer and stuff, you make a ton of money off of that on top of it. So I think if you're saying to your fans early in the season, hey, we're not going to try, by week 15, 16, 17, you're going to see empty stadium at home, and you can't really have that.
And it's also easier in the NBA because you have 10 guys, maybe 12 on a roster, and you can tell them, hey, this is our plan, we're going to try and do this. On an NFL roster, you've got 53 guys, and it's hard to go to 53 guys and get them to buy into, hey, we want to lose games. Because you're a professional. You don't want to lose games on purpose.
Definitely, and the idea of just saying to a player, hey, we don't care about winning and losing in your finite career, it's very short. Basketball career is much longer, is average longer than NFL career just because of injuries and just the physicality of the game. If you've got a basketball skill that is desirable, somebody's going to pick you up. In football, if you've been on a losing team for a while and you're just getting a little bit older and you're going to be a little more expensive in that free agency, and you have tape out there where you're not trying because that's what your team was trying to do, you're not going to get signed. So I feel like you're right there. Players aren't going to buy into it because it puts their career in jeopardy.
Exactly. It can be detrimental to an older cornerback that has been a good cornerback his entire career. Now they want to say, hey, we're going to be bad, so you don't try for a while.
Yeah, you start letting up some touchdowns, damn it. But I think this is the year where teams are starting to look at it. It's like we are in this place of mediocrity where we're not going to go up because just our talent level. If we keep getting in this, 7 and 9, 6 and 10 area and drafting in the low teens, we're not going to win any games there. We're not going to be able to move up. And at the same time, it's like, do we bottom out and just try to pick like you said, there's 3 or 4 quarterbacks that everybody really loves in this next draft class. I think this is finally the year where teams are going to be a little more creative and just say, we've got to figure something out. Because I feel like that's where sports is right now. It's like, if you're not contending for a championship, you kind of bottom out, which maybe that's a discussion for a different time. But I think in the NFL, this might be the year where we see teams start saying, screw it, let's go 2-14, 3-13, and see what we can get.
We've been dancing around it for a while, but I think we've already seen the seeds getting planted with one team in the NFL, and that's the New York Jets. They've already cut everybody over 30. They're going to start a god-awful quarterback. They're on their way to trying to go, like you said, 2-14, 3-13 to try and get one of these quarterbacks. And
that's a funny thing, too. It's like the Jets went through this entire offseason process looking at that quarterback board in their, on their depth chart that says, Christian Hackenberg, Bryce Petty, Geno Smith. It's like, you put those 3 guys together into one person, and they're still just okay.
Yeah, it's bad. Geno Smith isn't even on the Jets anymore. I think he's on the other New York team now.
Oh, shit. Well, that's even worse. Because he was probably the best of those 3.
Big signing was a Luke McCown, though. Oh, so there's that.
Watch out. And that's the funny thing, too. It's because Todd Bowles, he's on the hot seat, obviously. He's not had a great run with the Jets so far. Like, he's a guy that, as a coach, can't really afford to tank and lose some games unless the whole organization's behind it. And that's really where the question comes in.
It all depends on if the GM and the owner and the front office is in on the tanking or not. Because if you can give tanking time, to steal it from the Sixers, if you can trust the process, it can work. We've seen it work, but we just don't know if it's going to work in the NFL style of GMing.
Yeah, and that's where a team like, obviously the Jets are a prime candidate to tank because they have really a lack of talent all over the field. They, like you said, they cut all their veterans. They're going to be really cheap. They've got a bunch of free agent money coming in the next class, so maybe that's their idea of we lose some games, we get a good draft pick, and then sign some free agents in the offseason. But a team that's kind of already started the NBA's thought process in tanking / asset acquisition is the Browns. We've seen them just stockpile picks. They've got two first rounders next year and the year after that, and I think eight picks in the first 3 rounds in the next 2 years. Just some crazy numbers of the Browns having all this ability to pick some really top flight talent and then have some assets to move around. And then you saw them do a basically NBA style salary dump trade with the Texans to get Brock Osweiler, because the Browns, with all their young talent, wasn't going to be able to hit the salary floor if they didn't bring in somebody that already had an established big contract. And that's what they did with Brock Osweiler, who's going to make some ungodly number, like $19 million for being just terrible. But I think that's maybe where it comes in for the NFL is you take a couple of years where you know your roster is not going to be talented enough, and then you kind of stockpile like the Browns have, and then maybe they can figure something out in the next couple of years. Obviously, Brock Osweiler is not their quarterback of the future, but possibly if they can draft somebody high in the next draft and kind of develop them while they have Osweiler under contract, and he's kind of making up that difference between where they need to be money-wise and how much they're paying other guys, they can kind of maybe bridge the gap and get enough young players to potentially be good.
Yeah, it's definitely the Danny Ainge style of GMing, where you just get all the picks and hopefully that some of the picks pan out. That's what the Browns are doing. I think they might have found, I don't know if he's going to be their savior at quarterback, but Deshaun Kaiser was a solid pick, and he's got to be better than Cody Kessler and Brock Osweiler at this point in time. So why not see what you have with him? Maybe accidentally win some games, but still not try to be great, and then get one of these 4 quarterbacks that are in the upcoming draft.
I'm with you there. I think just in general, any team that we're going to talk about in a little bit that is on that fringe or maybe a potential tank team, the biggest thing that they're going to do is switch around quarterbacks. Because we've seen pretty much every team that if you're just pulling guys or benching a quarterback, if you're not switching a quarterback because of injury, you're probably sucking. So, I mean, a team that's trying to tank, they're not going to let a quarterback get in a rhythm with the offense. They're going to try to flip it around. It's like, oh, he's not doing well enough. We're going to throw in the other guy. And when you're the Browns, like you said, you've got a guy like Kessler. Maybe you're trying to show him off and make him a trade asset, make him a guy that somebody wants as a backup, or Deshaun Kaiser. See what you have there. Maybe you don't need to spend one of those high draft picks on a quarterback if he's a guy that you think can be a quarterback of the future.
So we've talked about 2 teams. What other teams are on your radar that are potential for tanking this year?
So this one a little bit fringe. I know it's not going to sound right just because of who they have on their team, but the Buffalo Bills, because they have a new coach, Sean McDermott. That nobody knows what the front office really believes in Tyrod Taylor. Like, they gave him a bunch of money, but it's basically all like, here's your starter money for this year, but we have no real penalty if we decide to cut you in the offseason. They don't know what they have in a couple other spots, like Sammy Watkins. The guy is always hurt. When he's out there, yes, he's a very good player, but he's out there half the season most of the time. Mm-hmm. And it's like he's coming up off his rookie deal in this next offseason. Do you give that guy starting number 1 receiver money? I don't see how you can when you don't know he's going to be on the field. They have nice pieces on both sides of the ball, like LaShawn McCoy at running back. They've got pretty good guys on defense. But if you're not confident in your quarterback and you don't know what you're going to have at some other skill positions, like maybe this is a season where you kind of see what you have as a backup, or Tyrod Taylor gets fake injured and you lose some games and then draft a quarterback that the coach and the front office are all behind.
Do you think they might be a victim of the Patriots and the Tom Brady fatigue, where they just know going in every year they have a minimal chance of even winning the division, let alone making the playoffs?
Oh, for sure. And then that's a big thing that happened with the Jets, too. Like, if you look at the free agent signings for all the teams in the AFC East, like, every free agent that looks at a team like the Bills, like the Dolphins, like the Jets, you have to say, hey, we have to play the Pats 2 times a year, and us winning the division's basically like 10 to 15%. So that's a tough sell. Obviously, if you got the money, you've seen the Jets go out and get guys like Brandon Marshall, but they still didn't even contend with the Patriots for the division in any of the years with him. So I think they are in that situation where maybe they tank for a couple of years. Maybe they do that Browns method of acquiring assets, wait for Brady to retire, which, as much as he says that he wants to play till he's in his mid-40s, it's coming up fast. He's going to be out of the league in the next handful of years. So maybe you get your assets all set for that season or two right after Brady, where you can finally put together a roster that can take that division over.
I think another interesting team at this point in time is the LA Rams. I mean, they just drafted a quarterback number 1 overall, but Jared Goff did not look good last year, as much as I picked him to be Offensive Rookie of the Year, which was probably the worst take of the year last year. But they seem like they might have their quarterback in place. They have young pieces on defense like Aaron Donald, who's probably the best defensive tackle in football. But they're in that weird place where they just got a new coach too. They don't know what they want to do on offense, it seems like. They could be in the running. I mean, there's a pretty good quarterback just down the road at USC there. Maybe they got their eye on him.
Yeah, I'm totally with you in that. You have Todd Gurley, who's a stud running back if you can block for him. That was their big problem last year. Their offensive line regressed so hard that he couldn't get anything going. And then, like you said, their quarterbacks were just abysmal. And then their defense has a lot of pieces. As much as Jeff Fisher's not a great coach and he deserved to get fired last year, he put a nice roster on defense out there. They just didn't all play well at the same time. So they got in the situation where maybe one side of the ball is playing okay, but then the offense goes out and it's 3 and out. So then the defense played so many plays. And I don't know if they're going to give up on Goff yet, because he was the guy that they kind of championed. Hey, this move to LA, we have a new quarterback, he's the face of the franchise. But he has to show something this year to give them some confidence that they don't decide, hey, maybe we need to draft something to bring in some competition. Because you're right, like, if they go through this year thinking Jared Goff's not the guy, they have to adjust quick, because they can't be at the top of the draft in this upcoming spring and look at all those guys on the board and pass them all on the small chance Goff ends up turning out good.
Exactly, you're so right. So do you think tanking can work in the NFL?
I think it can, because of the system that they have with their draft, where if you're the worst team, you have the number 1 pick. Therefore, you have the most time to figure out who you want, or if you need to trade down or move around a little bit to acquire some more assets. But the problem is, I think your fans turn on you faster in the NFL than they do in another sport, because there's so many more games at home in other sports. Like we're talking about with basketball, if your team's tanking but you still want to go to a game, you've got 41 chances. In the NFL, you've got 8, and the tickets don't go down when the team's bad. The ticket prices stay the same. So, when you're in a situation where you're trying to get a better roster, but you still have to maintain that business side and keep the fans at least engaged, it's got to be tough to put out a roster that is not even competitive. But I still think it can work if you can somehow sell that philosophy that, hey, if we do this for a year, we can turn it into something.
Yeah, it just seems like such a hard sell, because you're right, you have to keep the fans happy, which is even hard when you're winning sometimes. And like we said earlier, to keep players happy while they're losing games seems like it's especially hard in the NFL. So I don't know if you're going to get players to buy in to try and do that, but it could make so much sense, because if you get that franchise-changing quarterback like the Colts did with Peyton Manning, and like they might have with Andrew Luck now, it can save a franchise.
Yeah, for sure. And a couple other teams that are just on the fringe that I think also could be in this mix are the Jaguars, because it's pretty clear the front office has no faith in Blake Bortles. His rookie contract coming up. so they can let him go, be bad this season, let him go, and then draft somebody. And then I thought before the draft that the Bears were going to do it. They got Mike Glennon to start this year. They were going to suck. Go get one of these, top prospects like a Sam Darnold or a Josh Rosen. But then they go out and trade up for Mitch Trubisky. Kind of fucked that one up.
Yeah, that was a confusing move, to say the least.
Definitely. So, in the NFL, though, we see every year these teams come out, have a guy that they're not entirely sure of at quarterback, like we're talking about Tyrod Taylor or some of these other examples. Do you think some of these guys can outperform that and can get some faith? Like, could Tyrod Taylor have a good year and then get signed again? Or do you think the Bills are going to be a team that's just done, or some other teams like we mentioned are just going to play this year out and then just make that roster overhaul?
The Bills are such a hard one because, like we mentioned before, the Brady fatigue that's happened in the AFC East for so long. Because Tom Brady's just been there, so we mentioned it. You had no chance of winning the division. So and Tyrod Taylor's still fairly young for an NFL quarterback. I think he's around 26, 27. I mean, once you reach that 30 plateau, things usually go downhill. I mean, not as bad as a running back, but things go downhill as a quarterback. So I think, at least in the Bills' case, they have to take some time with Tyrod. They just gave him that contract. I know they can get rid of him fairly easy, but you got to see what you got. I mean, the Jaguars have done that with Bortles. He's played, I think, 4 years now, because he played like 3 games into his rookie year, so he's got almost 4 entire years under his belt. I think they're starting to realize that he's not the guy, but you got to give players time to realize if they're the guy or not. So that's why Jared Goff is probably going to play more. Tyrod's got to play more. The Browns need to settle on one guy to get them to play more. They just need playing time.
Yep, and it's kind of the anti-tanking case. It's like, how do you know if this guy's good if you don't give him a chance? But at the same time, it's like, you know what? We're not going to give him a chance because we don't want to figure out if he's good because we want to lose these games. It's an interesting back and forth, and it's just funny because you see in a sport like baseball, obviously another sport that's going on right now, we got teams that are out of the contention with over a month and a half of the season left. There are 45, 50 games left to play, and there are teams that have no chance. And you see these stadiums just bare bones. Like the Chicago White Sox are a great example. Every year, in the last few years, they've been pretty bad. And by the All-Star break, their stadium's about a quarter to maybe a half full. But now they've kind of gone that tanking route. They traded off all their good pieces. They're getting a lot of assets. I mean, they got Yohan Moncada now in the majors, who's one of the best prospects, and their farm system's pretty loaded. So tanking can work, and we've seen all these examples. It's just, can football adjust to it and bring it into that mentality and that amount of games? It's going to be interesting to see. And I think if it's going to happen, this is going to be the year that it started. Like you mentioned, the Jets have kind of planted those seeds, and Cleveland's done that to really just acquire all those assets and make it so that they have all these bargaining chips that maybe they can leverage into something down the line.
It's just all dependent on the quarterbacks. If the quarterback pans out and you tank for him, you look awesome. If you tank for the quarterback and he ends up being dog shit, you look like an idiot, and fans aren't happy.
I agree. All right, so we're going to move on from that one, but if you have any thoughts on some NFL tanking, leave it on our Facebook page or tweet at us. We'll say all the links later, and we'll put it all up. But let's talk about a little basketball. Wang, obviously this summer, been pretty drama-filled. The NBA playoffs sucked. I think we can all agree. There wasn't enough competition in these games. Even the finals, as much as LeBron and Kyrie went off against the Warriors, they kind of steamrolled them. 5 games, Warriors win. I mean, is it a good thing for the NBA that it just, as the offseason seems to be like more fan engaging and more interesting for the fans, that guys want to move around, guys are getting traded, guys are sniping at each other on social media? Like, is that a good thing for the league? Do you think that the offseason seems to be more exciting than even their playoffs?
I don't think it's a bad thing, is my initial answer, because you obviously want the regular season to mean more. You want people to need to watch the regular season, but with the meteoric rise of the Warriors and the dominance of LeBron in the East, you haven't had to watch the regular season. You haven't had to watch the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, really. You haven't had to watch the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, because the Warriors didn't lose a game until the finals. The Cavs, it was obvious that LeBron was taking the regular season off and was just coasting until he got to the playoffs. Even the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, you could tell he wasn't going 110% like he usually does. But the offseason, I mean, you want it to be fan engaging, and it's fun for players, fun for fans to watch where players go, watch on social media what people are saying. But it seems like it's not a great thing because the regular season has been so not fun. You don't want the off season to overshadow the regular season, which it seems like it has the last 2 years.
Yeah, and it's like I'm more excited for like fake trades and rumor mill stuff about where Kyrie wants to go or what teams are actually going to be able to trade for a guy like Kyrie Irving than watching their actual competition or even some of these playoff games. I mean, I think the average margin of victory in the playoffs this year was somewhere around 12 to 15, and it's like these are supposed to be your best games of the year. And there was these stories that came out right when they set the salary cap for the season that because the Cavs and the Warriors were so dominant in the playoffs and there were so few playoff games because they were such quick series, like the NBA teams lost money and they lost revenue for their salary cap. It actually dropped lower than what people were expecting. And it's like that has to be a sign to the rest of the league. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, fine, whatever. These super teams happen, but now we're going to lose money because of it. I feel like it's going to change some attitudes around the league.
Yeah, losing money is always a wake-up call to people that have a lot of money, like NBA owners.
Definitely. And the biggest drama, obviously, this offseason has been this bombshell that Kyrie wants to be traded. We thought Paul George, the Thunder, was going to be something big for a year, and where LeBron's going to go. But now that Kyrie says he wants out, it's kind of just become this whole back and forth of how quickly can they get him out, and how can they get good enough value for a guy of his talent. And it's funny because if you've seen this narrative shift between, oh wow, Kyrie's super selfish, he doesn't want to play with LeBron anymore, to, oh, wait a minute, LeBron's kind of petty, and maybe it's kind of hard to play with him, and just keeps going back and forth, and you can tell the people that don't like LeBron which side they fall on and everything like that. I mean, Wang, I know you're a LeBron guy, but at a certain point, do you think Kyrie has a point where it's like, everything I do, it just gets overshadowed by what LeBron does? Because if you think about it, Game 7 of the finals that they won 2016, Kyrie Irving hits the game-winning shot. But the thing that gets talked about the most is LeBron's chase down block, which was an incredible play and deserves praise. But it's like that game-winning shot almost gets overshadowed just because it's something LeBron did.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame the guy. Like you said, I'm one of the biggest LeBron fans out there, and I get made fun of it for it a lot by our friends, but I don't care. But I can't blame Kyrie. I mean, not a lot of people remember that Kyrie actually hit the game-winning shot to win Cleveland that finals, because it was the story that LeBron brought a championship to Cleveland, and LeBron was screaming, "Cleveland, this is for you," and LeBron was crying, and it was all LeBron. But he was, I'm not going to say he was carried by Kyrie, but Kyrie was a big part, and you can't blame somebody for wanting to be the guy in the NBA. Because you can go so many places anymore and be the guy. With these formations of the super team, there's so many teams that are looking for a superstar. Like out in New York, they've been desperate for a star since Melo started to fall off. They've signed aging stars like Rose and Joakim Noah. Down in Miami, since LeBron and D Wade left, they're looking for a star. That's where I think Kyrie's probably going to go, because Pat Riley gets shit done in the NBA. But he needs to. If he wants to be the guy, more power to him. But this is just the writing on the wall for LeBron to finally leave Cleveland, I think.
I totally agree. It's funny, though, because we heard for, the last 7 years, ever since LeBron went to Miami and then obviously Durant to the Warriors, it's like everybody complains, like, oh, you're supposed to want to be, the number one guy. You're supposed to want to, win it by yourself and be the man on your team. And then when finally somebody says, you know what, I don't feel like playing with LeBron, I want to be the guy on my team. Oh my God, you're so selfish. Why wouldn't when you want to play with the best? Rah rah rah. The media can just like the ideas that we have about sports can be so dumb and flipped on a dime. The minute somebody acts selfish, we pretend that we hate selfishness. But then somebody acts, for the good of a team and wants to play with the best player, it's like, oh, he's a pussy and doesn't want to, fight and win by himself.
I mean, I can totally understand the mindset of wanting to be the guy, but why in the hell would you ever turn down the opportunity to play with the best player on the planet? Like, you're in the finals. You're at least in the Eastern Conference Finals every year. You're probably going to the NBA Finals every year. Sure, it's going to be a tough matchup with the Warriors because they've obviously beat you 2 out of the last 3 years, but you're going there probably every year with LeBron. Why would you want out? Especially when LeBron's contract is up next year, why not just wait 1 more year and then say you want out after LeBron's on his way out?
There's a point I agree with you there. I think that the relationship between Kyrie and LeBron, everybody tried to make it big brother, little brother. I don't think Kyrie ever was a giant fan of LeBron to begin with, because you got to remember that first season after LeBron left, Cavs are terrible. They end up getting Kyrie, and then Kyrie's looked at this as like the savior of Cleveland and as this guy that's going to bring them back to at least competition. And he was all right, rookie of the year type season, and started playing well individually. The team success wasn't quite there. Went through some bad coaches and everything. And then LeBron comes back, and obviously he is the savior of Cleveland. He is the guy. He's going to, eventually bring them a championship. That's been their dream since he was 16 years old. But it kind of, I could see it in those first couple of years, like the overshadowing of a guy with the talent of Kyrie Irving wasn't going to sit well with him. Like, hey man, I toiled and I worked my ass off for this team in this city when we sucked, and you guys love me, but then this guy comes back and fine, he's better than me, whatever, but like I get nothing. Like, all right, well, I'm gone. I got a ring, I'm out.
Everyone in Cleveland has to realize that LeBron is the man in Cleveland, though. As much as Kyrie was built up when he was first brought into Cleveland, and he was the guy in Cleveland, but everybody knew the backstory from LeBron. He's from Akron, he's the Cleveland through and through, everything Ohio, goes to the Cavs, gets them to the finals, has no help, finally leaves, wins titles down in Miami, and you knew it, when and if he came back, he was going to be beloved. So Kyrie had to know that this was coming.
Yeah, but having to know it and then having to live it are two different things. Like the situation where he is just consistently overshadowed, and he would have monster games, and then it would just be like, oh, LeBron passing the ball really well. It's like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I think Kyrie's in a situation where he feels like he fulfilled what he said he was going to do for the Cavs. He's only got a couple of years left on his contract, and it's just like, you know what? I'm done playing with this guy. I want to be my own guy. And I think you're right to a point of, hey, why don't you want to win? Or why don't you want to continue having that guaranteed win? But it kind of goes back to the thing we were talking about. It's we want these guys to be the man on every, or we want these guys to want to be the man, but then when they're not and they say they want to be, it's like we shit on them for that too. It's like, what are we asking them for at a certain point?
The timing still just doesn't make sense to me, because people have been talking about LeBron leaving Cleveland for almost 2 years now. Everybody knows that his contract's up last year. He can opt out next year, and he can basically, it's another decision, even though we know he's not going to do that again because that was a train wreck. But he gets to pick wherever he wants to go again next year. So why doesn't Kyrie just play another year, keep his mouth shut? I mean, as stupid as that sounds, but keep his mouth shut, coincide with LeBron for a year. You got Kevin Love. Like I said, you're pretty much going to the finals no matter what. So why not just wait, and then when LeBron wants out, be like, hey, I too want out. And then you don't look like such a prick.
You're not wrong there. I think the timing of it's even worse because it was after the draft and everything. If I was Kyrie and I wanted out, maybe it just was a thing where he needed to collect his thoughts and kind of figure everything out. But I'm Kyrie, and I know I want out immediately after the finals, I'm telling him. Because then they have a lot more flexibility, and there were teams that are trying to move some people around, like, maybe they could have flipped for Chris Paul, or maybe they could have gotten a guy like Paul George in a bigger, 3-team trade to give Cleveland a little bit more than just a rental for Paul George or something. But I think you're right on the timing part, that he kind of put him in a situation where it's like, we're not even get close to fair value for you, and now we're in a situation where, well, we can't have you on the team because LeBron and you are not cool, and that's not going to work for a whole year. But now we don't really have a place to move you and get fairly compensated.
Do you think if they end up not trading him for whatever reason, do you think he would actually play, or do you think he would sit out?
Ooh, that's a great question. So you think, in that situation, you think Kyrie just doesn't show up, or do you think the Cavs bench him?
I would say it's probably more Kyrie won't show up and just say he wants out, get me out of here. But if the Cavs aren't going to get anything back for him, why would they trade him for nothing?
Yeah, I mean, there's supposedly a trade out there from Phoenix for, who was it? Dragan Bender, Bledsoe, and a first rounder, and that's probably the highest trade you're going to get on the market. But that's a great question. I don't know. I can't imagine the Kyrie-LeBron relationship after this summer can be repaired quickly. I don't think either one of those guys is a guy that's going to be like, hey, you know what, water under the bridge, let's go play some ball. They're not those types of guys. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. So, yeah, if they decide not to trade him, which I don't think is an option at this point, I think they're going to have to move him, even if they don't get what they should. I think if it came down to either you're not showing up and not getting paid, or you're just on the team, I think he doesn't show up. I think he sits out.
Yeah, that would be my guess, because I don't think the Cavs would keep him around and just not play him.
Yeah, and as much as a great,
what's the point?
Yeah, as much as a great team chemistry guy that LeBron at least portrays to be, or at least tries to be by passing all the time, it's like if you two hate each other and you're playing at the same time, it's like, how is that going to work? Where your de facto point guard, or your quote unquote point guard Kyrie Irving, and your actual point guard LeBron, like, don't want to give each other the ball. That won't work.
Yeah, that cannot work.
And I legitimately believe that they're both petty enough to lose games because they're not passing to each other, because they know even if, it won't happen this way, but even if they're like the 5th seed in the East, they can still get to the finals.
Yeah, they can both just flip a switch, as weird as it sounds, and you want people to believe that sports aren't like that. But for the greatest players in the world, it's like that. I mean, LeBron has shown it. But even Kyrie, to an extent, can just flip on a switch, and if they want to go win games and put shit in the past, they can go win games.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because as weird as it seems, as much as the NBA has dominated the summer conversation, it's like training camp starts in about 2 months. So the Cavs are going to have to do something, and I think it's just going to be interesting to see if they trade him, how Kyrie plays on that new team. Does he try to go out and be a guy like Russell Westbrook, jacking up shots all the time and scoring a bunch of points? Or is he going to try to become more of that true point guard role that he really never has gotten the opportunity to be in Cleveland, because before he had no talent around him, so he needed to take a bunch of shots, and then after LeBron came, it's like, well, he's running the show anyway. So I'm interested to see if he gets traded, kind of who Kyrie Irving becomes as an NBA player.
Yeah, I would guess he would morph into the true point guard style, especially if he had help around him. Because even now, with LeBron pretty much running point, Kyrie is still a good facilitator and gets the ball around when he has to. So I don't think we're ever going to see another Russell Westbrook where they just jack up shots. But it'll be fun to watch for sure.
Definitely. Do you think that Houston works where you have two guys who work best as primary ball handlers in Chris Paul and James Harden, or do you think it's going to be a real cluster and they're not going to know what to do until like December?
No, I think it'll work, because if Harden can, I know Harden likes to have the ball in his hand, but he needs to realize that he's a scorer and can get the ball from Chris Paul, and Chris Paul is a facilitator. So if he can kind of take a little step back from the point guard role and let Paul run the point, and then Harden just focus more on scoring, I think it can work out well.
I think you're right, just in the sense that so much of Harden's offense was that pick and roll, where he would either, fake getting fouled and get a three-pointer, get to the rack, or, throw in an oop to Clint Capella or other dudes on the Rockets. It could work. I'm wary of the fact that Mike D'Antoni, his entire offense, he's very one-guy ball dominant, and then obviously, Chris Paul is a good spot-up shooter, but his entire NBA career, he's been, high usage point guard, and then James Harden in the last couple of years has become a very good high usage, essentially point guard as well. So it's going to be weird to see how D'Antoni can flip it, because I'm not sure, with as bad as James Harden's defense is at 2, like how you're going to be able to have 2 undersized guys at 1 and 2, and then on the other side you're not really sure who's controlling the ball. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but I think eventually James Harden is going to have to decide, is he going to go back to that kind of slasher role like he was with OKC, or is he going to still try to be that top of the key pick and roll guy?
And it's also going to be interesting with D'Antoni's offense, because D'Antoni wants to run, and Paul is on the end of his NBA career, doesn't want to run as much.
Yeah.
And Harden is more of a set guy. And D'Antoni's teams are notorious for not playing defense.
Oh.
And James Harden is probably the worst defender in the league. So their defense is going to be scoring more points than their opponent.
Yeah, it'll be fun though. I think that's the fun thing with the NBA, just in general. It's easier because it's less people. It's only 5 guys. It's easier to kind of match up and kind of predict how things will go with a half court set than it is in football, where you sign somebody. For example, Brandon Cooks on the Patriots. You assume Tom Brady's going to give him the ball quite a bit, but you don't know exactly how it's going to look and how it's going to affect the other guys on the team. But in basketball, you can say, hey, if I throw a Chris Paul onto this team, how does spacing kind of figure out and everything like that?
Exactly. So the NBA season is going to be probably the most anticipated NBA season in a while.
Yeah, because I think, especially after they trade, I'm assuming Cleveland trades Kyrie, it's like, sure, the Cavs get back to the finals. That's okay. They walk through the East again, whatever. It's like, can LeBron beat the Warriors by himself? Probably not. And I say by himself because Kevin Love doesn't count anymore, especially how they use him. Just standing, hey, Kevin, go stand in the corner and wait. And then when you don't do very well in the finals, we're going to blame you.
Do you remember when Kevin Love used to get like 20-20 games on the reg up in Minnesota?
Yeah, because he played in the post. He didn't be a vegan or whatever and lose 20 pounds like a
white
bitch.
guy's supposed to do.
Yeah, hey, power forward, get down there. Wuss. Anyways.
Steph Curry ruined basketball.
Oh, Christ. Another time. All right, so let's finish up a little bit of baseball here. All right, your Oakland A's. Not in it. I'm sorry. However, they did flip Sonny Gray. Threw him to the Yankees.
For two injured prospects.
How bad injured, though?
Well, one blew out his knee once upon a time, and the other has thrown about 20 innings in 3 years.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a very good trade. That's kind of what I want to get to. I mean, for a guy that was so highly sought after and everybody knew that the A's wanted to get some value back for him, I don't feel like they got the best deal they could.
I mean, the 3 prospects that were brought back were 3 of the top 12 in the Yankees organization. And the one middle infielder they got is supposed to be pretty good. He's a speedster, can steal bases and play second and short. So at least he should hopefully pan out. But the pitcher they got got all sorts of arm trouble, it seems like. And the outfielder blew out his knee in his first game. So it's a crapshoot. But I think you're right. I think they could have got something better, but it's hard to say because you don't know what other teams were offering.
Yeah, and here's what I don't get about baseball trades in general. And we saw with a bunch of different trades that happened at the deadline this year. It's like, everything is for prospects. Like, why did nobody ever try to get an MLB, player already? Like, you're telling me that the Yankees wouldn't give up, I don't know, I don't know, who's on a Brett Gardner? Like, somebody that you guys could start today?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I don't know if, because the A's, it seems like, have been rebuilding for 20 years now. So I don't know if it's the fact that they want youth and are trying to build, and hopefully the youth pans out. Because what's a Brett Gardner going to do for the A's today? He's not a difference maker. He's not going to make him win the West by any means.
Yeah, true.
So I understand with teams like the A's and the lower tier teams who are still trying to bounce back from whatever they're trying to bounce back from, to get the young guy and hopefully groom them in the minors and hopefully they turn into something in the majors. They just want to. I think they just need to have time, because the starter that they could get is probably a middle of the road guy, isn't a difference maker. You're hoping a prospect turns into a difference maker.
That's fair. There were some other big deals. Obviously, Yu Darvish goes up to the Dodgers, and some other people, Quintana from the White Sox to the Cubs. The Red Sox didn't do a whole lot at the deadline except get Eduardo Nunez, and then instantly he somehow became the best player on the team. That's been kind of fun, just watching and saying, hey, that whole giant hole we had at third base all year is filled by the best player on the team now. And then Rafael Devers comes up, and he's immediately the best, second best player on the team, even though Dave Dombrowski said he wasn't ready a month ago. That fucking idiot.
They made a move for a reliever, too, didn't they?
Yeah, they got that guy from the Mets, but I'm still not sold. We can see what happened. He got shelled. He let up a homer in his first at-bat with the Red Sox, so that was fun.
Hooray.
Yeah. But this is the time of baseball where it's kind of hard to continue your attention to it because, yeah, you're getting close to that September, late August, September push, but at the same time, it's like, ooh, football's here. So
yeah, this is definitely where baseball struggles. Because as much as I said the NFL preseason is the biggest cock tease, I will watch an NFL preseason game before I watch a regular season baseball game.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are with me on that.
Yeah. If it's not the Red Sox for me, or if I'm not with somebody that has a vested interest in one of the teams, I can't really watch baseball. And I feel like that's where baseball is as a whole. It's like if it's not your team or if it's not a friend's team, you're not watching it.
Yeah, even high profile playoff matchups, Game 5 of the divisional series is still hard for me to want to watch if I don't give a shit about either team.
Yeah, but Wang, let's wrap this one up here, my friend. Let's tell the people how they can get in contact with us. You start.
I wonder if I remember. It's on Twitter at Fat Guys, or what is our Twitter handle? Fat Guys, capital N as in Nancy, Friends. There it is. And then we're on Facebook at Fat Guys and Friends. We have an email address, fatguysandfriends@gmail.com. And hopefully I can still get this shit on iTunes and you can get it downloaded right to your mobile device.
You can do that, or it will be on YouTube if that's easier for you. Because we've been out of practice, Wang. It felt good to talk some sports and get back in the podcast game. We got really, really drunk last weekend in the Wisconsin Dells, and we're like, why haven't we podcasted? And we said, hey, we're going to do it.
Even some friends asked why we hadn't podcasted. And
yeah.
That felt good.
We got questioned.
Yeah, we have fans, damn it.
We have to give the people what they want. Shout out to Jalen Rose. Bringo. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week talking a little more football and maybe talking about some Super Bowl contenders because last season's NFL preview took way too much effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are not doing that again. All right. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.